Have you ever cleaned your fireplace at home and thrown all that gray dust straight into the trash, thinking it was just useless dirt? Well, get ready because today you are going to discover that you have literally been throwing bags of money in the trash. Welcome. Today we are going to talk about the secret of pennies worth ash, a resource that we all have at our fingertips and that can completely transform the health of your plants, your vegetable patch, and your garden while spending almost nothing. I promise you that after seeing this, you will never look at the remains of a campfire the same way again. And here comes the most shocking part. There is a widespread myth that says ash burns roots and destroys the soil. Many claim it is an absolute danger, but the hidden truth that big fertilizer companies don't want you to know is the exact opposite. Ash is, in fact, one of the most powerful, fast-acting, and effective organic fertilizers on the planet. I want you to leave me a comment right now. Are you someone who throws away ash, or do you already use it in your pots? Write your answer below because I want to know how many of you already knew about this hidden treasure. To understand the true power of what we are going to talk about today, we have to take a little trip back in time. Before modern garden centers existed, with their shelves full of brightly colored plastic bottles and unpronounceable chemical names, our grandparents and ancient farmers relied on nature. For thousands of years, humanity has used forests and the remains of agricultural burning to nourish the earth. Ancient civilizations knew that after a forest fire, the earth was reborn with explosive force. The greens sprouted brighter, the harvests were more abundant, and the plants grew stronger. They didn't need laboratories to understand that there was magic there. That gray dust was their main source of minerals, especially before the invention of synthetic fertilizers in the early 20th century. However, with the arrival of industrial agriculture and modern convenience, this ancestral knowledge was gradually lost. They convinced us that it was better to buy a chemical powder in an expensive box than to use what nature itself gives us after burning a simple wooden log. Today we are going to rescue that ancient wisdom and adapt it to your own balcony, terrace, or vegetable garden. To start taking advantage of this resource, the first thing we must understand is what exactly this gray dust is that we call the black gold of gardeners. When we burn wood, we are destroying the carbon structure, but all the essential minerals that tree absorbed from the earth for decades remain concentrated there. We are talking about a pure nutrient bomb. Primarily, ash is incredibly rich in potassium and calcium, in addition to containing good doses of magnesium, phosphorus, and vital trace elements for photosynthesis. Imagine it as a high-quality vitamin complex, but completely free. Potassium is responsible for giving flavor to fruits and strength to stems, while calcium strengthens the cell walls of the entire plant. A clear example of this is seen when we buy a very expensive liquid fertilizer at the store, which often only contains a fraction of what a simple handful of the remains from your fireplace provides. However, it is vital to debunk the myth that any ash will do. No, we must only use ash that comes from untreated natural woods, clean branches, or pruning remains. Never under any circumstances use remains of painted or varnished wood or particle board, as you would be introducing heavy metals and lethal toxins into your soil. Now that we know how powerful it is, let's debunk the great myth that scares so many beginner gardeners. The idea that this material inevitably burns and kills plants. The truth is that this only happens due to a very common human error: excess. Because ash is rich in mineral salts, if you apply a thick, heavy layer around the stem of a small plant, those salts will draw moisture out of the plant tissues, causing what looks like a burn. It is exactly the same effect as rubbing pure salt on your skin. Therefore, the secret to safe and spectacular use lies in moderation and application technique. You should never create gray mountains around your crops. The correct way to apply it is by sprinkling it very finely, as if you were dusting powdered sugar on a cake, and always at a certain distance from the main stem. Imagine you are salting your food. A little enhances all the flavors, but half a kilo of salt will completely ruin the dish. A dose of between 50 and 100 grams per square meter is more than enough to provide all the benefits without running the slightest risk of damaging the delicate shallow roots of your crops. One of the most unknown yet most impressive uses of this resource is its ability to correct invisible problems in your garden soil. I am talking about the dreaded soil pH. Many people don't understand why their plants don't grow, even though they water and fertilize them constantly. Often the culprit is soil that is too acidic, which blocks the roots and prevents them from absorbing food. Well, ash is highly alkaline, as it contains large amounts of calcium carbonate. It acts as a rapid natural neutralizer. If your land is very acidic because it rains a lot or because there are many pine trees nearby, spreading a little of this gray dust will raise the pH almost immediately, unlocking trapped nutrients. This process is called liming the soil. In stores, they sell bags of agricultural lime that cost quite a bit of money, but you have the solution for free. As a practical example, you can do a homemade test. Take a little soil from your garden in a glass, add a little water and a splash of vinegar. If it bubbles a lot, your soil is already alkaline and does not need this treatment. If it does nothing, your soil is probably acidic and will immensely appreciate you sprinkling your magic dust on it. But its benefits are not limited to feeding the soil. It is also a relentless warrior against garden invasions. If you have ever woken up in the morning to discover that your beautiful lettuces or newly planted sprouts have been devoured, you surely know the frustration caused by snails and slugs. These mollusks are the nightmare of any plant lover. This is where our penny's worth trick comes in. These animals have a soft, slimy body that needs to always be moist to move and survive. If you create a ring or a small barrier of dry ash around the plants you want to protect, you will be building an impassable wall. When the snail tries to cross it, the dust extracts its moisture, drying up its slime and forcing it to turn around to avoid dehydration. It is a physical and natural method that saves you from using chemical poisons that could harm your pets or the beneficial wildlife in your garden. The only important detail you must keep in mind is that this protective shield loses its effectiveness when it rains or when you water from above, as it dissolves into the soil. Therefore, you will have to renew the protective circle after every storm. If you grow fruiting vegetables, there is a specific secret that will change your harvest forever. Let's talk about tomatoes, the kings of the summer garden. The most frustrating problem when growing tomatoes is waiting weeks to see them grow, and just when they are about to ripen, discovering a sunken, rotten black spot at the bottom of the fruit. This disease is commonly known as blossom end rot. Many believe it is a fungus or a pest, but in reality, it is a severe nutritional deficiency. The tomato lacks calcium during fruit formation. As we have seen before, our gray dust from the fireplace is a massive and free source of fast-absorbing calcium. To avoid this nightmare, the trick is very simple. When you go to plant your tomato seedlings in the spring, add a tablespoon of ash to the bottom of the hole. Mix it well with the soil and then place the plant. This ensures that when the roots begin to expand, they find an immense reserve of calcium that will prevent the appearance of those dreaded black spots. You will see how your tomatoes grow perfectly, juicy, and with firm skin resistant to cracking. It is crucial to stop for a moment to delve into the type of material we are burning, because this is where many make a fatal mistake. Not all woods are the same, and therefore, not all the residues they leave behind are the same. We must clearly differentiate between hardwoods and softwoods. Hardwoods such as oak, holm oak, almond, or olive are dense and slow-growing. When burned, they leave a much heavier residue that is richer in minerals, especially potassium. They are top quality for your garden. On the other hand, softwoods like pine or fir burn very quickly and produce a lighter dust with a lower concentration of nutrients, although they are still useful. But the real danger comes from the things we must never use. Forget about using leftover charcoal briquettes from the barbecue, because they usually contain chemical binders and petroleum derivatives to make lighting easier. Also, never use dyed industrial pallets or wood from old furniture, as they will release lead and toxic varnishes directly into the place where you will later grow your food. Always make sure to use only natural, clean pieces to guarantee the health of your crops. Another spectacular place where this resource works wonders is in your compost bin. If you have a pile where you throw kitchen scraps, fruit peels, dry leaves, and grass clippings, you have surely noticed at some point that it starts to smell a bit bad, like rot or vinegar. This happens because green, moist materials tend to ferment and create an overly acidic environment, which slows down the work of worms and beneficial bacteria that are trying to break down the matter. The magic solution is to sprinkle a thin layer of our gray dust every time you add a large layer of plant debris. By doing this, you neutralize that acidity instantly, sweetening the mixture. It is like giving the ecosystem of your composter a breather. In addition, you are incorporating hard minerals into a fertilizer that is usually rich in nitrogen, but poor in potassium and calcium, thus achieving a much more complete and balanced super fertilizer. However, remember the golden rule. Do it in small amounts. A light sprinkling every 15 days is enough to keep bad odors at bay and accelerate decomposition naturally. If you have fruit trees in your garden, pay close attention to this ancient technique that grandparents used to protect their orchards. Fruit trees, especially in winter and spring, are very vulnerable to diseases caused by fungi and bacteria that hide in the cracks of the bark, waiting for temperatures to rise to attack. They also suffer from the assaults of ants and aphids climbing up the trunk. To protect it without spending a penny on commercial fungicides, you can prepare a protective paste. The process is extremely easy. You just have to sift your gray dust well to remove large pieces of charcoal and mix it in a bucket with a little water until it forms a thick paste with the texture of dense paint or fine mud. With a large brush, paint the trunk of your fruit trees from the base up to the first crotch of the branches. This natural paint creates a highly alkaline crust that fungi are unable to penetrate. Furthermore, it disinfects small wounds in the bark and acts as a physical and chemical barrier that deters climbing insects. It is a homemade, cheap, and 100% ecological protective shield. Let's talk now about root crops. If you like to plant carrots, onions, garlic, radishes, or potatoes, you should know that these plants have very specific dietary needs. Unlike lettuces, which need a lot of nitrogen to make green leaves, root crops need large amounts of potassium and phosphorus to fatten up underground. They want energy to create thick, tasty reserves. Our treasure from the fireplace is exactly what they need. When preparing the raised bed before planting your carrots, gently spread the ash and mix it into the top few inches of soil. This will stimulate deep and strong root development, giving you much larger and sweeter harvests. However, there is a myth here, or rather a very specific precaution you must know if you grow potatoes. Although the potato loves potassium, it hates alkaline soils. If you raise the pH of the soil where you plant your potatoes too much, you will create the perfect environment for a disease called scab to appear, which leaves the potato skin full of rough, ugly scabs. Therefore, with potatoes, use extremely small doses or apply it in a highly diluted liquid form. And speaking of liquid applications, the time has come to teach you how to prepare one of the most famous magic potions in organic gardening, ash tea. Sometimes our plants need a quick rescue. When the dust is spread on dry soil, it takes weeks or months to break down and release all its nutrients. But if we see that our plants are weak, without flowers, or with drooping stems, we need a quick injection of energy. The tea is the perfect solution. To prepare it, take an old pillowcase or a porous cloth sack and put about 200 growers of clean, gray dust inside. Tie it well and submerge it in a bucket with about 10 L of rainwater or unchlorinated water. Let it sit in a dark place for a week, stirring the water a little every day. After that time, the water will have turned a light brown color, full of potassium and minerals completely dissolved, and ready to be absorbed almost instantly by the roots. Water your plants with this golden liquid once a month during the blooming season, and get ready to see an incredible explosion of color and vigor in a matter of a few days. For flower lovers, there is an undisputed queen in most gardens that responds spectacularly to this secret. I am referring, of course, to rose bushes. Roses are very demanding plants. They need a lot of food to produce those huge, fragrant flowers that we love so much. Potassium is the key element to achieving vibrant colors and thick floral stems that do not bend in the wind. Applying a couple of handfuls around the base of a rose bush in early spring, just when the new shoots begin to emerge, will give it the ultimate boost for a championship bloom. In addition, rose bushes often suffer greatly from fungal diseases on their leaves, such as black spot or powdery mildew. The extra calcium we provide strengthens the cell walls of the leaves, making them much more resistant to the attack of these fungal spores. So we are not only feeding them to make them more beautiful, but we are also armoring them from the inside out. A well-nourished rose bush is a rose bush that almost never gets sick. A vital part that is often overlooked when taking advantage of this resource is how we store it until it is time to use it. And this is where many people make a serious mistake that ruins all the effort. The worst enemy of your gray gold is water. If you leave your remains out in the open in the garden and it rains on them, all the soluble nutrients, especially the precious potassium, will wash away and leach into the soil in that single spot, leaving behind a useless, washed out, and worthless powder. To keep all its potency intact for months, you must collect it completely dry and store it in an airtight container. Ideally, use a metal bucket with a tight-fitting lid. And I say metal for an extremely important safety reason. Sometimes wood embers can remain hot inside under the gray surface for days. If you put that in a plastic bucket, it can melt or even start a fire in your garage or shed. Always make sure everything is absolutely cold to the touch before storing it, and keep it away from winter moisture until spring arrives. We have reached one of the most critical points of this entire manual. Just as there are plants that love this treatment, there is a group of plants for which ash is absolutely lethal. We cannot ignore this, because otherwise, you could kill your most expensive specimens. We are talking about acidophilic plants. These are species that by their nature have evolved to grow in very acidic soils, like those in pine forests. Classic examples are blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, camellias, hydrangeas, and heathers. If you sprinkle this highly alkaline material near these plants, the soil pH will rise sharply. When this happens, these plants suffer a sudden nutritional block, especially of iron. The plant cannot absorb iron even if it is present in the soil, and its leaves will quickly begin to turn yellow, keeping only the veins green. This is called iron chlorosis. If it is not remedied by re-acidifying the soil, the plant will weaken until it dies. Please keep your gray dust far away from these types of flowering shrubs and berries. In addition to acting as a barrier on the ground, we can also use this prodigious powder directly on the foliage to combat aerial attacks. As spring progresses, it is very common to see the tender shoots of our plants covered in tiny green or black insects. They are the dreaded aphids, and they almost always come accompanied by their protective army, ants. Instead of spraying harsh chemical insecticides, we can use a dusting technique. Wait for a time of day when it is not very windy, and preferably early in the morning, when the leaves still have a little natural dew. Take some of your very finely sifted dust and sprinkle it directly on the insects in the affected leaves. The dust will stick to the moist, soft bodies of the aphids, suffocating them and interrupting their respiratory cycles almost immediately. Furthermore, it creates a parched and dusty environment that ants detest, so they will abandon the plant in search of a cleaner place. A couple of days later, you can wash the leaves with a gentle stream of water from the hose to leave them clean and free of the pest. If you have a lawn area at home, you have probably faced the problem of moss at some point. That dark green, spongy blanket that begins to take over shady areas, slowly suffocating the grass until it leaves ugly bald patches. Many people spend fortunes on anti-moss products that darken the soil and stain the pavement. But moss is actually an indicator of two things: a lack of light and, above all, soil that is too compact and very acidic. Grass hates acidity, while moss loves it. Spreading ash over these problem areas of your lawn during late winter or early spring is a spectacular and economical solution. On the one hand, it neutralizes the soil acidity all at once, creating a hostile environment for the moss, which will eventually dry up and recede. On the other hand, the massive dose of mineral nutrients will act as a spring fertilizer for the remaining grass, giving it the necessary strength to expand and recover its lost territory. It is a double healing effect that will rejuvenate your meadow completely naturally. It is time to warn you about a very tempting but incredibly destructive mixture that many gardeners try to make. When they discover the power of ash, they often think that if they mix it with other organic fertilizers, they will get the ultimate super fertilizer. However, there is a strict chemical rule that you must not break. Never mix your fireplace dust directly with nitrogen-rich fertilizers like fresh horse manure, chicken manure, urea, or guano. Why? Because when highly alkaline calcium carbonate comes into direct contact with the nitrogenous compounds in these fertilizers, A chemical reaction occurs that transforms the valuable nitrogen into ammonia gas. That gas evaporates instantly into the atmosphere. Basically, you are causing the most important nutrient for the green growth of your plants to evaporate into the air, lost forever, in addition to generating an unbearable smell. If you are going to use both products in your garden, the correct technique is to space them out over time. Apply one first. Wait for it to rain or water deeply for at least 3 weeks, and then apply the other. Moving on to more creative uses, did you know that it is also an exceptional preservative for the next season? Those of us who save seeds from our best tomatoes, pumpkins, or beans to plant the following year face two great enemies during the long winter months in the drawers. Moisture, which can cause fungi to grow and rot the seeds, and the dreaded weevils and small insects that can sneak in and eat our treasure from the inside. An ancestral technique to guarantee the viability of seeds is to use a glass jar. You put your well-dried seeds inside and add a couple of tablespoons of completely cold and dry ash on top before closing the lid. The dust will act as a natural desiccant, absorbing any minimal trace of ambient moisture inside the jar, maintaining a perfect dry environment. At the same time, its saline and abrasive composition is completely inhospitable to any insect or microscopic larva that might try to develop there. When spring arrives, your seeds will be intact, strong, and ready to germinate with all their vigor. When we prune our fruit trees or large shrubs, we often leave large open wounds in the wood. Those cuts where the shears or saw have passed are the perfect entry point for moisture to penetrate and bring with it bacteria or the dreaded spores of wood-rotting fungi. Stores sell petroleum-derived healing pastes or artificial waxes, but you have the perfect, free, and ecological remedy in your fireplace. Right after making a clean pruning cut, take a good handful of your sifted dust and rub it directly onto the moist, freshly cut wound of the plant. The material will instantly adhere to the oozing sap. This application does two fantastic things. First, it dries the superficial wound immediately, stopping the bleeding of sap. Second, it creates a disinfecting, caustic, and alkaline layer over the cut, which cauterizes the tissues and absolutely prevents any pathogenic fungus from settling there. It is like applying an antiseptic powder to a scratch, a brilliant home remedy that accelerates the healing of your trees. You are probably wondering if you can use this master trick indoors, in your living room, with your delicate indoor plants like pothos, monstera, or spider plants. The answer is a resounding yes, but with extreme caution regarding the dosage. Indoor pots have a very small volume of soil and a closed ecosystem, so any sudden change in pH can be fatal in a matter of days. The trick here is microdosing. One of the great advantages of using a pinch of this material on the soil of indoor pots is the control of annoying pests, especially fungus gnats. Those little black gnats that flutter around the house are born in the moisture on the surface of the potting soil. If you sprinkle a very thin, almost invisible layer over the substrate, you change the texture and dry the surface quickly after watering. This prevents the gnats from laying their eggs and cuts their reproductive cycle at the root. Furthermore, that microdose will provide minerals very slowly, also preventing the appearance of that ugly white mold that sometimes grows on the soil of the plants we have indoors. To finish our review of the main uses, let's do a very simple exercise and talk about the economic impact this has on your pocket. The ultimate cost-benefit analysis. Think for a moment about how much you would spend at the nursery if you had to buy everything that this simple powder replaces. A bag of agricultural lime to correct the acidity of your soil would cost you about $10 or $15. A small bottle of liquid fertilizer, rich in potassium and calcium, to fatten up tomatoes and flowers easily goes for another $10. Add a bottle of granulated poison against snails and slugs, which is also toxic, adding another $8. And if we include pruning sealer and anti-moss products, we quickly surpass $40 or $50 every season. Faced with all that recurring expense and those polluting plastic containers, we have a resource that is generated naturally, that solves the problem of waste from agricultural burning or our winter fireplace, and that has a literal cost of $0. Adopting this ancestral knowledge is not just an act of rebellion against consumerism, It is a giant step towards a much more conscious, respectful, and above all, economically smart way of gardening. And there you have it, the ultimate plot twist. What most people see as dirty waste at the end of a barbecue or a cold winter night turns out to be the most complete and cheapest nutritional supplement, pH regulator, and pest protective shield that exists in nature. We have debunked the myth that it is dangerous. We have seen how it saves your tomatoes from rotting, how it keeps the dreaded snails away, and how it fills your roses and fruit trees with color and strength. The key, as in all good things in life, is in moderation and knowing how to use it in the right place and at the right time, always avoiding our friends, the acid-loving plants. In short, if you have clean wood, you have gold for your garden. Thank you so much for staying until the end of this video. If you were surprised by any of these tricks or if I helped you save money this season, please give the video a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more garden secrets, and share this video with that friend who loves plants. And now it's your turn to answer my final question to debate in the comments. Which of these 20 uses for ash are you going to try first this very weekend? I'll read your comments below. If this information has transformed the way you see the remains of your fireplace, make sure to subscribe and like this channel. We are unearthing the wisdom that others tried to hide. Grow your future with us. The next treasure of nature will be revealed very soon.